can't remember what caught my attention, but I was in just this most beautiful place, and I just stopped. And I looked around and I threw my hands up in the air and I just yelled, "I am here."
Welcome to the follow-up question. I'm your host, Michael Ashford. Come with me on a journey as I explore what it means to find common ground at a time when it feels increasingly harder to do so, to listen more than we speak so that we can understand that our differences don't have to divide us. My aim with this show is to bring you perspectives and ways of looking at issues or topics that perhaps you haven't considered before, so that you can then take that new knowledge and apply it to your ability to empathize with the people around you. I'm a former journalist who believes everyone has a story to tell, and it's only when we ask questions and listen that we truly reveal what connects us as humans. Our dreams, our desires, our experiences, our ideas, and who we truly are. Over the last year and a half, in the midst of all the upheaval and trauma that has consumed our daily lives, I've developed a hatred of the phrase, "time heals all wounds." What a bunch of garbage. Yes, we can gain clarity and perhaps a better understanding of the events that have affected us when we put time between ourselves and the hurt, but simply waiting for days to pass is trite and unhelpful advice when real relief is needed. I think the deeper reason why I can't stand "time heals all wounds" is because it infers that we aren't supposed to take an active role in the healing process. Just wait long enough and you'll feel better. Yeah, that's not true. If it were, I wouldn't replay conversations in my head late at night, months after they'd taken place. There'd be no such thing as holding a grudge. There'd be no shame, no guilt, no regret. My guest this week, Ashley Lemieux, she and I see eye to eye on this topic. In her new book, I Am Here, Ashley writes about how untrue "time heals all wounds" actually is, as she recounts the many deep scars she holds. We all have wounds from our past that can affect how we show up in the world today, but our shared pain and trauma can help us better understand each other as we seek to find common ground around bigger issues. As Ashley writes about in I Am Here, maybe healing isn't about what we don't feel, and instead is about what we do. You and I have a mutual hatred of the phrase "time heals all wounds." And I want to I want to put a little bit of context into why I don't like it, and then I want to ask you about you and why you don't like it. Very early on this show, I talked about after the election of 2020 and all of the social injustice that we saw in 2020, that our wounds and the things we were dealing with were too big to let the passing of time solve those issues. You have, as you write in your book, many, many wounds that you invite the reader into. Why does the phrase "time heals all wounds" not resonate with you?
And that phrase doesn't resonate with me for a lot of reasons, but the biggest reason is because time doesn't heal us. I have found time does not heal us. Healing heals us. And in order to find healing in our life, especially from those hard things, we have to actively participate in it. And so there's different times throughout my life where tragedy has happened, and I've heard people say, well, distance will help you, or time will really heal those wounds. And not only is it not true, but I feel like that phrase is really harmful, because in our minds, it gives us some magical destination where we're just suddenly going to be okay, and it requires whatever okay looks like, and it requires no work on our end, but we have to participate in healing, because healing is what heals us.
What does it mean to be an active participant, take an active role in healing and not just simply passively let time go by and expect good things to happen?
This is such a good question. And I think one of the hardest parts is the very first step, which is we need to acknowledge. We need to acknowledge the areas in our life that do need healing. And it's hard because it's painful. I think a lot of times we spend a lot of time trying to run away from pain. At least I did. And I thought that if I could run away from pain, the faster I could run, the more work projects I could take on, the more I could distract myself, that maybe I could outrun the pain. And then I realized that even though time was giving me distance between the event and now where I was, because I was running, all of the pain was still right there. And so for me, acknowledging that healing needs to take place was the first step. And then actively participating can look like a lot of different things depending on what you need. For me, it's looked like therapy. It's looked like space to be able to process. It has looked like writing and meditation and connecting with people who I can find support from and who have gone through similar things as I have, so that I could have that in a community. So there's a lot of options, but it first starts with acknowledging the dark places that we often are too afraid to step into.
One of my favorite ways to get away from the busyness of the world is to go hiking here in the mountains of Colorado. I go alone on a trail, and I don't get lost, perhaps get lost in thought, but I'm on the trail, and it's just me and nature. There's often an overwhelming desire to take pictures and take videos of the whole thing, but then I withdraw and say, I want this just for me. This needs to be my thing. It's a boundary that I set for myself, that the rest of the world doesn't get to be a part of this restorative process of mine. And that's what we need more in our lives, our day-to-day lives, our boundaries. Not everyone gets a front row seat to the healing process. That's not fair to you. That's not fair to your pain. We have to be better at setting boundaries. And in her book, Ashley introduces us to her clarity mapping process, which can help establish an active healing process, which includes setting boundaries. At what point did you begin to come to that realization, Ashley, that running away or busying yourself was not going to heal you?
So my husband and I unexpectedly lost our two kids who we were permanent guardians over during an unexpected contested adoption. We had raised them for over half of their lives. And after they left our home, I didn't know who I was anymore. I didn't know what life was anymore. The amount of pain I felt was so dizzying that the only way I could survive in that moment was to keep distracting myself. And so the amount of work projects that I was taking on, the amount of traveling that we were doing to try to just get as far away from the place of pain as we could, it ended up making me feel even worse. I was exhausted. I was worn out. I was just not able to hold myself up anymore. And there was this moment, we actually had traveled to Europe for the first time to literally get as far away from where everything happened as possible. And I had watched a little girl around my daughter's age talking with her mom, and suddenly she lost her first tooth. And they were so excited, screaming, jumping up and down. And I sat there and I just started sobbing because it took me back to the time when I had that experience with my daughter. And I realized in that moment across the world that no matter how far I tried to run away, it was still going to keep up with me, and that I needed to start living in my present moment and processing and dealing so that I could heal and stop trying to run away from my life.
I remember reading about that in the book, and I believe at one point you found yourself alone in an alley and yelled or screamed just
Yes.
into the void. Ashley, what was coming out of you at that point that you're yelling at no one and everyone in particular?
Oh, I love how you just said that. I was yelling at no one and everyone at the same time. So after that moment of watching her lose her tooth, I got up because, again, my initial gut reaction to protect myself was to run. And I started literally running back to where we were staying. And I can't remember what caught my attention, but I was in just this most beautiful place, and I just stopped. And I looked around and I threw my hands up in the air and I just yelled, I am here. I am right here. And the power of my voice surprised me because I hadn't felt powerful for a really long time. And that moment was really crucial for me because it invited me back in to start actively participating in my life again and being able to do it from living in my present moment. So I am here has started to really become a mantra for me of no matter what has happened in the past or what's going to happen in the future, I'm in this moment and I can claim it as my own. And what if the pain is teaching me something, but if I keep running away from it, I'll never learn. And so that moment really, really was a critical part of my healing process.
How then do you begin to say, I'm healing, I want to, as we just talked about, be an active participant in my healing and not just let it fall by the wayside, but then take that and say, other people either need to hear this or I want other people to hear this. Take me through the path that you went on to come to that point or that realization.
Writing for me has always been something that is really healing. It's a way for me to put words to really confusing emotions and then give them a place to live that's outside of my body so that I'm not just holding on to it so tightly. So as I was processing my emotions and that, as I was just trying to figure out, well, you're in this dark place. Like, how do you get up today? How do I find purpose in my day? How do I find intention and all of these things? I started writing about it. I had an online community that I've had online for about a decade now. And I decided that I was going to start sharing some of my feelings with them online because I just kept thinking, if I feel like this right now, there has to be someone else. There has to be someone else who's also trying to figure out how to keep moving forward in their life. As I started sharing, the amount of messages and comments and emails, I mean, thousands and thousands from women all over the world who I always say the details of our lives are so different, but the feelings we share are the same. So as they are connecting to the feelings I'm sharing and they're reaching out because they're able to take a breath because now suddenly they don't feel so alone. That really began to fuel me to keep writing more because pain does this really tricky thing to us where it can create a lot of shame and we feel like we're the only ones feeling it. So we feel really alone. In my healing, it's been really important for me and a lot of the women I've talked to not feel alone anymore because when we feel less alone and we can drop the shame, then we give ourselves permission to connect with other people, to find support with. And so that's what I wanted to be for other women. I wanted to create a place online. I wanted to create resources and tools that literally felt like their best friend was sitting right there with them. I wanted to give them everything that I had wished that I had. And in doing so, that actually brought a lot of healing for me because I was able to connect with other people who were feeling the same way.
We've talked about and you brought up the fact that you lost your two children who you were guardians over, but you also detail in the book abuse as a child. You go through the miscarriage that you and your husband ultimately suffered. Ashley, what feelings of shame were you dealing with in those instances? And does shame take on, well, that's a multi-part question. I'll just I'll leave the question as is. Yeah. How was your shame showing up for you?
Man, I feel like shame is one of those things that can just stop us dead in our tracks. And this is the first time that I'm publicly talking outside of my book about the abuse that I went through as a child. And I specifically remember, because when you're little, the way that we process emotions and where we're at in our development, we remember a lot of sounds and smells and feelings. And I remember growing up feeling very ashamed of just my body, of who I was, of using my voice. I was really, really afraid to use my voice. I felt very powerless. And that was a pattern that kind of repeated itself growing up, that I really tried to push away for a long time. And then last year, my husband and I got really sick. I went septic at 16 weeks pregnant, very unexpectedly. And that resulted in the loss of our baby boy. And those same feelings not only resurfaced, but it was like a tsunami of them. I had so much shame surrounding my body. How could my body fail me and my son and my family in that way? I had so much shame about not being able to keep him safe and healthy. And it really started destroying me. So something that, that experience brought me back to those feelings of when I was young, of the shame that I had carried for so long. And I knew that I had a lot of work and a lot of healing to do so that thought pattern could be stopped instead of destroying me. So something that's been really empowering for me is reframing my thoughts. A thought that I often had was, I feel so powerless to use my voice, powerless over my body. And that's something that I had a lot of shame over. And so I started trying to reframe it. What if I'm not powerless? What if I'm brave? What if, as a little girl, I was so brave, even though I felt powerless, to keep showing up into the world, to keep trying to use my voice, to keep moving forward? And now after my miscarriage, what if I wasn't powerless, but what if I was brave? What if I was brave to try to get pregnant in the first place? What if I was brave in the hospital while I was sick and through my healing journey? And so that reframing for me has really helped me replace shame and those really, really, really painful negative emotions with a positive emotion that I can acknowledge that I'm displaying, so that I can drop some of the heavier feelings that would otherwise hold me back.
Is that something you have to practice, Ashley? Because the thing that pops into my mind in hearing you say that is gosh, at first it must feel so what's the word? Inauthentic. Like you're trying to tell yourself something that you don't really maybe believe at first. Is it just the repetition? Is it the practice? How do you actually become to believe the opposite of what you felt, the bravery instead of the powerlessness, like you said? Does that question make sense?
It makes total sense. And yes, it is a practice, because there's going to be moments where emotions come up that feel so deep and heavy. But I think that's where we get stuck a lot of times, is we get stuck in those deep and heavy emotions, and that we forget that there can be something opposite of those. So for me, after my miscarriage, and I was feeling these same feelings that were triggering how I felt as a little girl while I was being abused, what I started doing is I started picturing myself now talking to myself as a little girl. What would I say to her? Because now, looking back on myself, I am not ashamed of her. I'm so proud of her because she was so brave. And I can see myself differently now because I'm in my 30s and I'm not, 5. So being able to really try to make an effort to view myself talking to who I was as a child, and how if it's a current situation of how, if you had a daughter, how would you be talking to her? How would you be viewing her? How would you be loving her? And I really, really, really fought to be able to view myself from other people's lenses, because you're right. It feels really inauthentic. It feels really hard to even tell yourself that when you don't believe it at all. But the truth is that we really don't have to carry shame with us. And so the practice of saying that for me now, because I believe it so deeply, it becomes a feeling. And I think for a while we have to keep telling our minds, because we've told ourselves the same stories for so long, right? Like we've carried shame for so long that it's going to take a while to replace that shame with a different positive feeling. And going into it, we just have to acknowledge that it's going to be hard, and it's okay that it's hard, but that there is hope for moving forward.
Ashley, another reframe that you write about in the book is turning anger and how you view that into passion. What can you walk me through the process of what that looks like to identify, as you write about in the book, root causes of anger, and how you ultimately draw passion from that, rather than, I believe you write in the book, when your blood begins to boil?
Yeah. Specifically speaking from the experience of being a woman, we are told that that being angry is a very negative thing. So when you're told that you're angry as a woman, it has this very negative connotation that then normally makes you want to change what you're saying or doing so that you're not viewed as angry. And as I've looked back on different experiences in my life, I've thought, oh man, my anger has actually driven so much good. It's gotten me up. It's made me fight for things that I believed in. And so what if it's not anger? What if it's passion? I get asked a lot from women online how to find their passion. So many people don't know how to find their passion. And I also get a lot of messages from people saying, why aren't you talking about this thing happening in the world? It should make you so mad, and I'm so mad at you for not talking about it. And my response always is, if this is the thing that's making your blood boil right now, maybe this is something that you are deeply passionate about that you can change in the world. Maybe it's something that you need to spend more of your time and attention on, and it's going to actually bring you to life. Your anger is going to create a passion in your life that's going to fuel you and create change. And so when people ask me, well, how do I find my passion? How do I find my purpose? I always say, what's the thing that makes you angry? What is it? Because whatever that is, go after that. And it's going to keep you fulfilled, because that passion can turn into that anger can turn into a sustainable passion that creates a lot of good.
I love that you just talked about, I'll use the word deflection of someone coming at you with their own anger and pain. And you even, again, to reference what you write in the book, you write about viewing negative energy that others try to put on you as them fighting through their own journey of pain. The response to that, Ashley, do you feel we understand that enough, that when somebody's coming at us, that it really is more a reflection of them and not us? Oftentimes, not all the time, but often.
Yeah, I don't know if we fully understand that, because when someone's coming at you and attacking you verbally, it's the easiest thing to do is to get really defensive about it and to make it be about you. Like, well, why? Like, what's wrong with me that you are thinking this about me, or you shouldn't be feeling this way about you. And it used to give me a lot of anxiety to get online, because people always have opinions about me. People have opinions about anytime as a human we show up into the world, someone's going to have an opinion about us, whether it's positive or negative. But the negative ones and those messages that I received sometimes were giving me a lot of anxiety. And then I realized, oh my gosh, this thing I said or did was very triggering for them, most likely because they've walked through an experience with pain that this is triggering. And so something that I say now is I'm so sorry that your pain has given you this experience with the world. And then I always say, peace be with you as you go on your way. Because I also think a lot of times, we want to fix a lot of things. We want to control people's perceptions on us. We want to prove that they're wrong and we're good and we're right. But for me, I have found that when I say peace be with you as you go on your way, and a lot of times I don't even tell them that, I just say it in my head so I can put up my own boundary. I acknowledge that what they're looking for in life, what they're looking for right now to help them heal their pain, is not something that I'm capable of giving them. And so it allows me to free myself from the pressure to change or to give them, something that I'm not capable of, and just cut off that energy that can get really negative sometimes.
I love that. I love that perspective, Ashley. Switching gears a little bit, reading the book and hearing you even just talking about it now, the entire, even calling it a situation with your children, ultimately being taken from you and going back to their biological family, I felt you were holding back details, experiences, that you weren't sharing everything. Is that true?
Yeah, that's very true. My first book, Born to Shine, I talk a little bit more about it, but I've never fully given all the details. And actually, that's not even something I talk about, but to be totally honest here, it's not something I feel safe talking about. And there's to understand our situation requires an understanding of the juvenile court system as a whole. It requires an understanding of the foster care system as a whole. And unfortunately, there's a lot of change that needs to be made in those systems to protect this country's most vulnerable children. And so for me to share some of the details of our case that I wish I could share, but I also don't feel safe in doing so, it's kind of, it's continuous motivation for me to use my voice and use my experience to get into those dark places of the system, to try to make a change so that maybe one day it's safe for people to share their stories, and kids are safe in a system that is supposed to be helping them instead of creating more trauma.
And I actually love that you didn't share everything. And I'm not going to ask you about everything because what really drove it home for me as I was reading your book, Ashley, was the moment where you went to upstate New York in your car all by yourself. It's those moments of being alone by ourselves and holding on to those moments and not sharing with the world that I believe can really fulfill us. Like it's a secret that we only get to have, and not trying to compare that to the court system and everything that you went through with your children. But those moments, like you talked about at that lake in upstate New York, as you were driving to that retreat, what do those moments do for you? The moments that you hold dear. You don't have to tell me the moments, but what do those moments hold that you don't share? Because you live a very public life, right? What do those moments do for you, Ashley?
Oh, it's so interesting because I live a public life, and I really try to use my experiences to create validation and healing for other people's experiences, so they feel less alone. But there are also so many things that I do not share. I share less about my life than I do share. And those moments, I feel like we're all given these precious moments that come for a moment. I heard someone describe it once. It was actually Shawn Mendes. I'm obsessed with him, and I was watching his documentary. But he he described it as, when you see the moon and it's so beautiful, there's a big full moon outside and you want maybe to share it with someone and you try to take a picture, and the picture of it is never the same as being there in person, because some moments in our lives are only meant for us, and the impact of them is an impact that only we can feel and understand. And so I'm grateful for those moments that I've been given. They kind of get me. They feel like these little, I don't know if it's a prize. I don't know a better word for that, but they're like these little prizes that are gifted to us throughout our life to help us keep going. And they're created just for us. And I feel like sometimes it's like universe, it's like God saying, I see you, I'm here with you, I love you, you've got this. And I hold those moments really, really close to my heart.
How do we become more aware of those moments?
We have to pay attention. And paying attention is really hard when you're in pain. I have found that pain often brings distraction. When we're in pain, one of the first things we do is we try to distract ourselves, whether that's through eating, whether that's through shopping, whether that's through drinking or binging Netflix or getting on social media for hours at a time. Pain often brings distraction. And if we want to be aware and notice those things that are being gifted to us, we have to get still. And it's really uncomfortable at first to get still because it brings a lot of feelings. But this is why I believe in healing so much. And I believe in putting the effort into our own healing, because if we don't, we not only try to distract ourselves from the bad things in our lives, but we're so busy distracting ourselves that we're also being distracted from the good. We have to have both. Our life is a mixture of both the bad and the good, but we have to be living aware so that we can feel them. Otherwise, we miss out on everything.
You write about in the book referencing that joy can be one of the scariest emotions. I'd love to just hear from you. I know what you wrote about in the book, but why? Why do you see joy as a scary emotion?
Joy terrifies me sometimes. Joy, it can feel like it's the feeling of waiting for the other shoe to drop. It's the feeling of, today I had a really good day, so what's coming for me tomorrow? And I think especially after trauma or loss or grief, we realize that a lot of the things that we were afraid of that actually did come true and then happened to us, that they can happen again. And so joy leaves us in this very vulnerable place, because once we go through a hard moment again, we know how deep the despair and the pain can get because we've been there. But I have found, and this is something that pain taught me, that it took a while to teach me. There's this beautiful word "and" that I love. And so that's something I tell myself is, I feel joy right now and I get afraid of, well, what if I feel grief later? Or what if I'm sad? But I've learned that we can feel grief and joy. We can feel sad and hopeful. We can feel really upset, and we can also feel a lot of love. And those two feelings can coexist. So when we allow them to coexist and we acknowledge that they can coexist, it makes joy feel a little bit less scary, and joy can start becoming something that we feel deserving and worthy of feeling again in our lives.
In light of everything that you personally went through over the last year and what we as a collective have gone through, Ashley, that message of and feeling scared in the moment and hopeful for the future, for instance, are those the kinds of conversations that you're having? I mean, I know you're getting emails from women, especially all around the world. Is that the message that we need to hear the most right now?
I think that's the message. I think it's okay. It's okay if you are grieving right now. And I know that this feeling isn't going to last forever. I know that because I know what the pattern has been in my own life. And I know that, if life feels like it's over right now, I also know that your story's not over yet. I think that small, simple message of and can go a long way, because healing and moving forward and trying to rebuild our lives after something happens, it can be something like we've lost a job, or we've lost a relationship that we loved, or we just don't know, we just don't know what we're doing next. I feel like the word and invites us to look at healing a little more simply, so that we stop overcomplicating it, and we have a little bit of help not feeling so stuck in our lives, because really there's some little things that we can do, where if we just do them one day at a time, healing becomes constant movement instead of one big magical moment that sometimes I think we get stuck in our heads that we're going to feel at someday in the future. But it can come right now with small little choices every day.
So how does this all fit into clarity mapping then? And which came first, the understanding of the power of the word and, or clarity mapping? Can you walk me through that, Ashley?
So I started clarity mapping. It's my process of moving from feeling just stuck and afraid to finding freedom and a path forward in my life. And I started it about 8 months. It was around 8 months after we lost our older two children. And it was hard for me to get out of bed. And the amount of pain I in was really crushing my spirit, my soul, every part of my life. And that is when one day I was getting ready and I was really, really sad. And I just lost it. And I just said, pain, what do you want to teach me? It was the first time I addressed pain like she was a person or something. And I just said, what do you want to teach me right now? And so that came first, because I started understanding that I could learn from my pain. Then I decided that every morning I was going to start meditating to create intention throughout my day. And through that meditation, I uncovered 5 questions that still guide me today, because these questions really created clarity throughout my day that allowed me to find a path forward when I felt like I was just at a heavy brick wall. So as I took those questions, for example, the very first one is, what is my intention today? An intention is something that gives you a path forward. It allows you to know what to say yes to in your life, allows you to know what to say no to. For me, going from being an active mom 24/7 to now it's just my husband and I lost a lot of my purpose in life. So creating a daily intention gave me a purpose again. And as I saw myself making small forward progress with finding a daily intention and then answering 4 more questions that came to me over the course of my meditation practice, I realized that if I could just dig a little bit deeper and listen to the answers that my own self was trying to bring to me, that I could make some forward movement in my life. And so those questions then led to my process of clarity mapping. And clarity mapping is taking your intention. It can be either your whole life intention, or it could be an intention that you want at the beginning of the year, or at the beginning of a month, or at the beginning of the day, just, depending on where you're at. And taking that intention and then really creating tangible actions that you need to do to bring it to life. Something that happens after we go through something hard, or we go through something like a pandemic and life feels really scary and we're not sure what to trust, and we're not sure if we should move forward here or if we'll be held back because the pandemic's going to heighten again, or we're just unsure of what to do. With clarity mapping, it allows us to have choices again in our life, and it allows those choices to bring us freedom so that we don't feel so stuck. So that's what clarity mapping is. And it's something that I believe and that I've seen can help you go from being really afraid to live your life to finding a lot of freedom, because you have clarity on what the next steps look like.
What do you think somebody needs to know before they get into the process of clarity mapping? What do you think is going to be the hardest thing for them to perhaps get over in the process of setting their intention and answering those other questions that you write about?
If we're talking specifically from my point of view as a woman, for women, I know that their worthiness to feel good things again often gets in the way. When someone goes through something hard, or something that they love has been taken away, or they've been beat down by other people's words or actions towards them, it's really hard to feel worthy of living a life that is full of goodness again, that is full of joy, that brings you happiness at the end of the day. And that's something that I think a lot of us need to work through, that we are worthy of these good things so that we can stop getting in our way of accomplishing them. And so for me, and that's actually one of the questions, is why am I worthy? And that's in there because I realized that as I was going through this process and I was seeing myself make these strides in my life, I started feeling really guilty about it. Well, if I was a good mom, why would I be happy right now when I don't know if my kids are safe and where they are? And it became this mental torture that totally could have stopped me from being where I am now in my life. And so I really had to work through that. And I think it's important that we acknowledge that those feelings of guilt during the grieving process or during loss, that they come, and when we know they come, then we can be prepared for it. And no matter what has happened in your life, you're still so worthy of experiencing joy and fulfillment every day.
Is there a moment or a thing or an experience that in the moment you felt guilty or shame about being happy about it?
Yeah. There's been several of those, but one of them was writing my first book. My whole life, I'd always wanted to be a writer. Literally, from when I was 8 years old, I would tell you, I want to write books to help people heal their hearts. That was always my thing. And so then when I started writing my first book, about a year or so after we lost our older two kids, I started feeling really guilty about it. I started feeling guilty that I was trying to pursue my dreams still, that I was finding joy in it. And there were multiple times where I almost just scrapped everything altogether and said, I'm not doing this anymore. So I had to work through a lot to get to this place now where I'm writing my second book and where I am finding so much fulfillment in this work. And I often, now there's times that I felt guilty. I started reframing it as a way to one day, hopefully, I think if my kids ever find me, I want them to be proud of me. I want them to see that I continued building my life and doing work to help other people that they fueled. I don't want them to see their mom having had the life sucked out of her. And so as I started reframing some of my thoughts around my guilt and unworthiness to live, this life and do what I love doing, it's helped me get to this place where I'm in right now.
Ashley, in the same vein that you talk to yourself as an 8-year-old and imagine yourself talking to her, I want to talk to 8-year-old Ashley right now and ask, you didn't want to just be a writer. You wanted to be a writer who helped heal hearts. Who was your influence? Where did that desire come from?
This is so funny because I feel like I need to figure this out because I'm a huge advocate for therapy. I was literally in therapy yesterday and my therapist asked me the same question. And at the moment, I'm like, why can't I find the answer to this? Why is this hard for me to uncover? But I don't know. I don't know. It was one of those things where, and maybe I'm just really lucky to have had that feeling. But when I was little, I was very in tune with my feelings and the feelings of people around me. I've always been really sensitive, but when I was little, I was really sensitive. And looking back, I'm wondering if part of that desire is just me watching the people around me and feeling and seeing their hurt, and me, having had gone through the abuse that I had gone through at that point in my life, that I didn't have words for yet, that I didn't understand yet because I was still too little. I'm just, looking back, I'm wondering if all those things kind of came together, and feeling my broken heart, seeing other people's broken hearts, wanting to create words so that everyone could just be happy.
Who or what inspires you now?
My family, my kids, sometimes it's these women. When I was actually writing I Am Here, I wrote it, I printed out an email that I had gotten from a mother who lives in Australia. And so she's on the other side of the world, and she had just lost her baby she had a stillborn baby, and she wrote me this email, and I printed the email out. Her name is Abby, and I put it on my wall, and I wrote basically my book to her. These women that I find and I connect with, I really try to do it one person at a time, and they inspire me. Their stories of courage and resilience inspires me to keep doing this work so that I can do my best to provide tools and hope for them when they feel like they're at the end of their road.
For the person who reads the entirety of your book and understands everything that we've talked about up to this point that you write about, what do you hope they close that last book page? They close the book and set it down. What do you hope they leave with? Understanding, knowing, perhaps about themselves or about you? I guess really the question is, what is your hope for the book?
My hope is that the reader puts the book down and feels a little bit of a sparkle of power back in their life, that they're able to really stand firmly where they are at this moment of their life, and be able to repeat and say the words, I am here, and be able to mean it, and be able to know what their here and now looks like, and then give them permission again to dream. I want them to find freedom. I want them to be on this journey from fear to freedom that leads to this power of clarity that can only come from accepting our current moments. I was asked the other day in an interview, I was asked, what do you hope people learn about you from your book? And I said, I don't want anyone to learn anything about me. I wrote this because I want them to learn more about themselves. And that is my greatest hope ever.
Love that. Ashley, last question that I ask of all my guests for you here. What's a question that you wish you were asked more?
Oh my gosh. That I was asked more. Oh, this is a good one. Let's see. I think I would like to be asked more. Maybe something to do with what do I want to be doing in my spare time? And maybe you'll help me come up with the question, but I feel like I'm always asked, well, what's next? What's next? Are you writing a new book? Are you, and I love those questions because, I'm excited about things that come next, but I also wish I was just asked, if this is the last thing that you've done, how do you feel about it? And then what are you doing just in your daily life to bring you joy? I don't know if that makes sense, but that's actually something that I think about a lot.
That kind of flows into an earlier question that I asked you about, the moments where it's just you. Without prying too much, what I want to ask the question: how do you recharge yourself? Where do you go to, in those moments, find joy?
I love nature. I love being with my family and my husband in nature. I literally will take off my shoes and just dig my feet into the earth and just feel the earth. I get so much joy from that. And so I always am trying to connect outside and be in the sun. We actually live right on a hiking trail. And so I'm always out in the mountain. And it helps me just disconnect and just be there, in those moments that are just made for me. And it brings me a lot of joy.
And I lied. That actually is not my last question, because I thought of one more that I wanted to ask you. You're on the board of a nonprofit, correct? To
Yes.
reform the foster care system. What do we not understand? What do I not understand as somebody who's very vaguely familiar of the foster care system? What would you want me to know about the system and the work that you all are doing to reform it?
So I am on the board of directors for a nonprofit called National Angels, and they support children and their caretakers who are in the foster care system to bring support and to walk alongside of them and advocate for their needs. I'll give you an example of what a lot of people don't know about the foster care system here. And first of all, every state is different. So it's not operating on a national level, and you're not having, the same rules and guidelines across the board, which causes a lot of detriment to those who are in the foster care system. But something that a lot of people don't know is that children's rights are basically non-existent. In the state of Arizona, animal rights were created before children's rights, and children's rights were then created based off of what animal rights were. So if we look at the system of children's rights as a whole, and then we look at the foster care system, there's not a lot of help that keeps these kids out of repeated trauma. The average child in foster care goes into 7 different homes. That's 7 different traumatic moves that come usually at the snap of a finger, with 7 different families and schools and friends. And at the same time, there's not a lot of mental health resources. And this vicious cycle of not giving these kids permanency and expecting them to process these really, really big adult emotions that they should never have experienced in the first place, and then not giving them help to get through it. Of course, there's great providers. Of course, there's great organizations like National Angels who come in and try to step in and help that. But as a whole, there's so much that needs to be done so that the trauma can be less and that permanency for a child in foster care can come more quickly.
Well, thank you for the work that you do there. It is important and blessed work. And so, Ashley, how can people connect with you, follow along with your work, your journey, your story, and of course, the book? Where can they find it?
I love my community on Instagram. You can come find me at Ashley K. Lemieux, and you can also come connect online at theshineproject.com. And then I Am Here is available wherever books are sold. And I just feel so honored to have these words make it to your hands. So come join us, come say hi.
Thank you so much, Ashley. Best of luck and best wishes to you and your family. Thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks so much for having me.
Thank you to Ashley Lemieux for joining me on the show this week. Please do me and Ashley a huge favor. Share this episode with someone you know who might find some value in listening to today's conversation, particularly about establishing boundaries and taking an active role in the healing process. Please share this episode with your network. Help spread the good word about the importance of asking more questions. And if you like the conversations with the amazing guests like Ashley Lemieux that I have on each week, be sure to subscribe so that you never miss an episode. If you ever want to get in touch with me, you can always email me at michael@thefollowupquestion.com, or you can go to thefollowupquestion.com and reach out there. You can also sign up for the free newsletter, which drops every Friday there at thefollowupquestion.com. I'll catch you on the next episode of The Follow-Up Question, and until then, keep asking questions.